Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 114, Call Me Fran. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. For Morty's birthday, Fran gets Maxwell to procure good tickets to a basketball game, but is then disappointed when her father sends Sylvia to go to the game in his place. Fran takes her concerns to Dr. Miller, who helps her realize that she chases distant and repressed men to keep her at arm's length, just like her father. In case anyone was curious, that man is Maxwell. Fran tries to reset the boundaries between her and Maxwell to maintain their professional relationship, but after discussing the matter with her mother, she realizes that her father is never going to change, and neither is Maxwell. Fran decides to move out of the mansion and get on with her life. In a last-ditch effort to stop Fran from leaving after she announces that she's quitting, Maxwell calls her by her given name, stopping her dead in her tracks. While he won't agree to call her Fran all the time, it's a big enough step to keep her there for now. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, so we open up. We're in the living room. Niles is there. Fran's coming down the stairs, and Niles says, "Miss Fine, the way you're dressed." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "You're dressed." And so I guess, again, I think this is a moment where we have to talk about how she's dressed.
Oh, absolutely.
So she has like a striped, like colorful sweater on. It has like yellow, green, red, blue. And then she's wearing jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Fran explains that she's actually taking her father to a basketball game for his birthday. And he likes women that dress so conservatively. And Niles is
Mm-hmm.
like, "Is that why your mother dresses so demurely?" And Fran's like, "Meanwhile, one time she bought this backless dress and he made her return it because it showed too much cleavage. And Niles is like, cut too low in the front." And Fran's like, "You wish the front." At this point, Maggie and Brighton come in the front door. And Maggie is talking about how the party's starting at 8:30 and a lot of hot chicks will be there. So you owe me. And Brighton's like, explains to Fran, Maggie's taking him to a mixer at her sorority house. He goes up the stairs. Fran turns to Maggie and asks, bring a geek party. And Maggie's like, "I like so own that trophy."
Mm-hmm.
Leaves as well. This is when Maxwell walks in. And he holds up tickets, and there are two center court tickets for tonight's game. And Fran's, telling him how she so appreciates him getting those for her. This is the first time she's been able to afford to give her father anything really great. These are comps, right? And Maxwell's like, "Think of them as my gift to you." Um, and then, Fran's like, "Thank you." And Max is like, "Don't you look adorable today? You could be Margaret's sister." "Well, sister, stepmother," says Fran. At that moment, the doorbell rings. And instead of Morty, it is Sylvia who walks in. And Sylvia immediately walks in and says, "Oh, Niles, you smell delicious. What is it? Ham?" And Niles kind of smirks. But Fran's asking, like, "To Daddy, why isn't he here?" And Sylvia says that Morty couldn't make it, but he wants them to wave from the good seats. And Fran's like, "He's not coming. He didn't like my gift." And Sylvia's like, "Oh, he did. He just wasn't feeling well. He ate a whole box of sausages." And Fran's like, "Ma, the dog's been dead for 5 years. You still kept her treats, although you got her collar and leash hanging in your bedroom closet. But that's probably none of my business." And Sylvia's like, "You're right. It's not." And then Fran says how disappointed she is. She wanted to see her dad. And Sylvia's like, "Well," um, and all this time, Sylvia's getting like Fran's coat and jacket, or sorry, coat and like hat out of the little closet. Uh, anyway, Sylvia though is like, let's go. I've been dying to see a basketball game. I don't know how I put it off for the past 50 years.
Yup.
Uh, that's the opening scene. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay, will you take us to the basketball game?
Sure. So we're now at what looks like the Nassau Coliseum, and Fran and Sylvia are there, and Sylvia wants to know what's wrong. And Fran, is looking at the guys, the people around them who are watching the game and energetically watching the game, shall we say. And Fran says, I miss daddy. And then, they see the cameras pointing towards them. And so Fran picks up this big sign that says, Happy birthday, daddy. And so she starts jumping up, Happy birthday, daddy, we love you. And then she like kind of jumps saying, ow. And she turns to her mother and says, well, good thing I'm wearing jeans or that guy would have just taken my temperature. Sylvia looks at the guy who is sitting behind Fran, says, pig, and then turns back to Fran, did you feel a ring? And Fran just looks at her kind of scandalized. And then Sylvia says to her, well, if you're not going to finish that pretzel, I'd like to take it home to daddy. And Fran's like, I thought he had an upset stomach. And Sylvia gets a look on her face, and Fran's like, Ma, were you lying to me? And Sylvia's like, well, I was half lying. And Fran's like, why? And Sylvia's like, well, he did eat a box of sausages, but it didn't bother him. And Fran's like, but then why didn't he want to come? And Sylvia explains, because he knew that the tickets came from Mr. Sheffield. Fran's like, so? It's not like I had to do anything to get them. Lord knows I'm the only one still burning a candle in that window. And Sylvia's like, darling, he doesn't want to take anything from Mr. Sheffield. It breaks his heart to see your young life being wasted by a guy who's never going to marry you. I can't even talk about it or I'll get all choked up. And then she like turns on a dime, peanuts, shouting for the guy who's selling peanuts at the basketball game.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to the kitchen, I believe?
Yes, so we're at the kitchen. The kids are all around, the table. Niles and Cece are there too. And Maggie starts laughing. And Brighton's like, what's so funny? And I guess he's actually standing like behind her. And Maggie's like, oh, I'm just thinking of that hysterical JJ Walker impression you do. You should really do that for the sorority party. And Brighton's like, oh, you mean dynamite? And Maggie's like, stop. You're going to peak too soon. Brighton leaves. Cece kind of sidles up to Maggie and smirking says, bring a geek party, right? I remember well. And Niles kind of gestures towards Cece. This baby brought me home gold. Brought me home gold. At this point, Fran comes in through like the side door. And she says, Gracie, I'm sorry, honey. They didn't have your choice of Secrets of Life at the video store, but I got your second choice, Operation Dumbo Drop. And Gracie's like, that was your choice, Fran. And Fran's like, I know, I'm just a little depressed and kind of needed an upper. And Gracie's like, well, what's wrong, Fran? And Fran's like, oh, sweetie, this is a grown up problem and you're a little girl. And then she starts kind of like choking, sobbing kind of thing. My daddy doesn't like me. And she leaves. And so Gracie's like, oh, let me. And she gets up, snaps her finger. Yeah. And she grabs a piece of cake. Now, I considered this kind of then all one scene. Did you?
That's fine. Yeah.
So we then see Fran getting on the couch in the living room, and Gracie comes in from like the back hall. And just a side note, remember the days when the kitchen were on the other side of the living room?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But anyway, so Gracie comes and offers the cake uh and kind of sits. Is it on the little table?
Yeah, it's like the coffee table.
Yeah. And she's like, all right, honey, talk to me. And Fran's like, what's wrong with this picture? And Gracie's like, you mean because you're the adult and I'm the child? And Fran's like, no, because you didn't bring a fork. But the other thing is true too. And Grace is like, so what happened with your father? And Fran's like, he doesn't approve of the relationship between me and your daddy. He doesn't know what me and your father have together. I don't know why? Have you heard anything? And Grace is like,
Mm-hmm.
Fran, you're a grown woman. You're over. And Fran kind of gives her a look. So Gracie says, 5 feet tall.
Yep.
Why is it so important what your father thinks? And Fran's like, he always finds, sorry, he is always finding fault with everything I do. I mean, I can never please the man. Gracie's like, Fran, what does Dr. Miller say when you talk about your father in therapy? Fran's like, I haven't even finished talking about when my mother took me trick or treating Halloween dressed as Catwoman. Why she had a black latex bodysuit hanging and oh well, I guess that's none of my business either. And
Mhm.
that's to see. Um, that was like kind of a mini therapy session with Gracie. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I'll take us right to the real therapy session.
Exactly. Go for it.
So Fran basically took Grace's advice and went to Dr. Miller, but this is not her usual appointment. And so she starts by saying that she hopes it's not too much of an imposition. And we then cut to see Dr. Miller, who's lying flat on his stomach with his shirt off, getting acupuncture done.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that even though it's not your regular appointment, being drilled by needles feels oddly similar. And so Fran's like, well, where was I? And the acupuncturist jumps in, your father disapproves of you. Fran's like, oh yeah, that's right. Thank you, Ken. And before she can continue, Dr. Miller suggests that he wants to do a Rorschach test. And she's like, Rorschach from Welcome Back, Cotter. And Dr. Miller's like, no, no, go pick up one of those ink blot cards there and tell me what you see. And so she goes and picks up the card. It's a white card with a black splotch. And she says, oh, you mean this black smear? Well, I don't know. I guess you see a gorgeous off the shoulder mirror wearing white wedding dress. And Dr. Miller's like, you see a white wedding dress in that black ink? And Fran's like, yeah, uh-huh. You know, this is the negative. The proofs haven't come back yet. And Dr. Miller's like, Fran, don't you see the connection here? You came in with a crisis about your father and you jumped right to marriage. Fran's like, wait a minute. Are you saying that I want to be married to my father? Because if that is buried in my subconscious, let's just build a Home Depot over it and move on. And Dr. Miller's like, I'm saying that marriage is the ultimate expression of acceptance and love. That's what you want from your father, and that's why you keep seeking out men like him. And Fran's like, you mean that I seek out distant and repressed men that keep me at arm's length? Who? And both Ken and Dr. Miller say, Mr. Sheffield. And Fran's like, oh my God, I've been chasing after men that reject me just like my father my whole life. Oh, Dr. Miller, you're a genius. And she throws her arms around him, accidentally pressing the acupuncture pins further into his back, in which he says,
Yeah.
ow.
Yeah. Understandably so.
Uh-huh. Those needles are only supposed to go so far.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Oh, no, just needles, not nails.
Oh, did I say nail? I'm sorry. I meant to say nail.
They were not, yeah. They
they
weren't that extreme.
no, that would be way worse and probably would require a tetanus shot.
Mm-hmm. So then we go back to the Sheffield residence. Cece's stepping out of the bathroom. She fixes her hair in the mirror, but then she notices Niles asleep on the couch and she gets a smirk on her face. She picks up a cigar, puts it in Niles' hand and where the
Feather duster.
feather duster was. She then goes and pours a glass of whiskey or some type of liquor, puts that in his other hand, and then she puts up his like onto the coffee table. And then right then Maxwell walks in and Cece whispers to him, "Can you believe this?" And Maxwell immediately is like, "Niles." And so Niles, of course, jerks awake, standing up. What? And he notices the cigar and the liquor, and he's like, "Sir, would you believe she put these things in my hand while I was asleep on the couch?" And then he realizes what he said, and he's like, "That sleep part was a bad defense, wasn't it?" And Cece, of course, does her classic like laugh cackle thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so Maxwell's no longer right there, so it's just Niles um, and Cece, and Niles says, at the risk of sounding like the doctor who delivered you, this could get ugly. At that moment,
Mm-hmm.
Fran walks in, and she spots Maxwell, who had drifted closer to like the front, like closer to the door where the little desk, like table is. But anyway, Fran announces, that she was just at her therapy session and we've got to talk. And Maxwell's like, Miss Fine, you've been talking for a solid hour. Aren't you talked out? Well, that's a silly question. And Fran's like, don't you, uh, hold on. Oh, don't you, my
Well, so
handwriting's,
he asks her, "What's on your mind?"
yeah.
And then she
And,
says, "First of all, don't you think it's a little strange that we've known each other
oh,
for
yeah,
five?" Go ahead.
and you still call me Miss Fine. And Maxwell's like, well, Niles calls you Miss Fine. And Fran's like, that's different. He's the butler. I get a charge out of that. You call me Miss Fine to keep me at an arm's length. And at this point, Maxwell literally puts his arm out and says, now hold it right there. That's not true. And Fran, of course, gestures to where his arm's out and says, People's Exhibit A. And
Mm-hmm.
then she's like, you know what? You're exactly like my father. And Max was like, that's absurd. I've never met your father. No one has. I'm not even sure he bloody well exists. Side note, like her father was on the boat just a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, but
He's
we
not
didn't
back
hear
yet.
anything from him.
Yeah, but he was there. One
I
would
mean,
if he's been in places where they're present.
correct. I mean, we, yeah, that's exactly right. Like we've
Anyway,
seen him at different things, at different, I mean, even actually, if you want to play that game, in season one, in the episode Here Comes the Brood, you know, after Maxwell and Cece have to chase Fran and Gracie and Sylvia to Fran's cousin's wedding, Sylvia says to Maxwell, hold on a minute, I want you to meet my husband, and then immediately turns and shouts, Morty! Like you can't imagine that Maxwell and Cece left before they got to meet Morty.
mhm. Well,
So
I mean, like, there's just anyway. I did that line just kind of struck me. I know it's comedic, but I was like, I'm pretty sure you've like shared meals at their house and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Um, anyway, uh, so Fran said to Maxwell's assertion that he doesn't even know if he bloody well exists. Fran's like, well, he does, and I have been chasing after his love my entire life. And he's at the root of every doomed relationship I've ever had. I'm completely screwed up. And she like grabs the drink from Maxwell's hand, swigs it back, and kind of loses her balance. And she goes on, I'm a basket case. And there's only one way for me to achieve any kind of mental health. You have got to change, mister.
Uh-huh.
And that is the scene. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay, can you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. So um we're in the kitchen and Fran's there and uh she's talking to Val, and in the back we see Gracie is cooking. Fran is saying to Sylvia, well, it's been Val. Fran is saying to Val, well, it's been 3 whole days and Mr. Sheffield hasn't changed at all. I don't know. Maybe I was too subtle. And Val's like, well, that's always been your downfall. Um, and Fran's like, this whole thing with my father has gotten me just so confused. I mean, where do I go from here? Trying to get some guy's approval has always been my whole raisonette. And Val's like, meanwhile, if I could blame my father for why I'm going to end up alone and miserable, I'd be the happiest girl in the world. And Gracie says, Fran, as far as you and daddy goes, you have to redefine the boundaries of your relationship. You're his nanny and nothing more. Val snarkily says, well, that should be a smooth transition. Fran turns to her and says, well, Val, all those hard knocks made you a little bitchy. And then Fran
Mhm.
points to Gracie. Would you look at her? She is baking cookies for herself. She's so independent. She's not looking for some guy's approval. That kid is the answer to all women in the future. Val agrees. And then we see Brighton comes downstairs, picks up one of the cookies, tastes it, and he says, Gracie, I said chocolate chip, not oatmeal raisin. And Gracie takes the cookie sheet of cookies and basically throws them into the sink. Well, I guess I can't do anything right. And Val and
Mhm.
Fran exchange a look.
Yeah. Yep. So then we go to the office and Fran comes in and says, Mr. Sheffield. And Maxwell gets up. Oh, Miss Fine, don't you look lovely? By the way, Niles is in the office while this exchange is happening. Uh, but So Fran kind of looks down her outfit. Oh, you like? Don't compliment me. How am I ever going to break the habit of needing your approval if now you start giving it to me?
Right.
Here. Yeah. And she hands him a sheet of paper. That's my schedule. Those are my hours. You're the boss. I'm the nanny. I'm on a coffee break. Goodbye. And Maxwell follows her. Come on, Miss Fine. Don't be so foolish. And I think he pulls her into a hug at this time.
He does.
And then though she pulls away, and please let's keep a professional distance. That was just for the road. And she leaves. And so Maxwell turns to Niles. Niles, I don't know what the woman wants anymore. What am I supposed to do? And Niles is like, may I speak freely, sir? And Maxwell's like, yes, of course, old boy. And Niles starts advancing onto Maxwell. I am so bloody sick of hearing this year after year. Niles, what am I to do? I told her I loved her. I took it back. I'm afraid of commitment. I'm worried about the children. For God's sake, make a move. And like at this point, he had advanced so much on Maxwell that Maxwell had sat on the couch. But at this point, Niles grabs his lapel, pulls him up, starts shaking him. Do something. You passed on cats. Do you want to regret this for the rest of your life too? And then he throws him to the couch and walks out.
Uh-huh.
And he encounters Cece in the hallway, and Cece's like, what's going on in there? And Niles is like, well, I have had it. I am trying to convince him to give up on Miss Fine and move on with his life. And of course, Cece immediately perks up, runs into the room, and we hear, I agree with Niles. What are you waiting for? Just do it. Do it. Do it.
Yep.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, if you're not going to watch the entire episode, it is worth watching that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're now at the Fine family home, and Fran comes into the kitchen. Her mom is like in a house dress doing some cleaning. And Fran walks in and she's like, Ma, I brought cake from the health food bakery. It's flourless, sugarless, and dairy free. And like she tastes it and then does a little jolt and drops the whole thing in the garbage. And Sylvia's
Mm-hmm.
like, darling, I didn't know you were coming. I'm going to the gym. And Fran's like, really? And Sylvia's like, yeah, this is my second time. I went once to join, and now I'm going to renew. And Fran's like, Ma, I'm very upset. I really need to talk to you. And Sylvia's like, I'm sticking to my diet, darling. So if you're looking for Entenmann's, the cupboards are bare. Fran's like, no cookies, no Count Chocula, nothing. I mean, I'm depressed. I need some junk. And Sylvia points to the challah on the table. Have some bread. I don't want bread. I need sweets. Have the bread. So Fran walks over to the bread and picks it up, tries to pick it up from the top. And guess what? The top comes off. Fran's like, ooh, look at this, a Jewish pinata. Because the top came off and there was candy inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sit at the table and Sylvia's like, well, what are you so upset about, darling? And Fran's like, oh, well, I had a big breakthrough in therapy all about daddy. Sylvia's like, what did that con artist tell you? That everything that's wrong in your life is your father's fault? Yes, Mom. Thank God it's not me. And Fran's like, but Mom, why don't Daddy and I connect? I mean, after Nadine was born, did he really want a son? And Sylvia's like, oh no, he loved his girls. And Fran's like, but then how come you always dress me like a tomboy? I mean, there are pictures of me sitting on Daddy's lap. You'd swear I was a Katie Lang dummy. Oh, darling, you're grasping at straws there. Your father adored you. He just had trouble expressing himself. So he's a little distant. It's just his way. You know, children tend to idealize their parents while they're growing up. You know, they don't, and it's worth noting that Sylvia's sitting at the table and she's eating a chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you know, they don't see that underneath this veneer, we're not sophisticated people, she says with her mouth full of chicken. And
Mm-hmm.
Fran's like, well, meanwhile, Dr. Miller says I'm attracted to men that always keep me at a distance because that's the way that daddy treated me. And Sylvia tells her, you know, your father always did his best, but he's not going to change. You know, you should focus on changing yourself, not him. And like this sets off like fireworks in Fran's brain. You know, Mom, you are absolutely right. Of course I'm right, says Sylvia. Fran's like, I gotta change myself. As long as I'm living under the same roof as Mr. Sheffield, I'm always gonna feel this way. Sylvia's like, naturally. Wait, huh? Fran's like, Fran gets up. I'm gonna move out of that mansion, get on with my life. And Sylvia starts chasing her. What like? You're 2 shakes away from being a cleaning lady. Wish me luck,
Mhm.
Ma. And Sylvia's like, oi, I'm going to cut out my tongue. That's not what I meant. And that's that scene. Do you have anything you want to
Yeah.
add?
No, we then kind of transition, seeing Fran going down this walking briskly back and Sylvia chasing her, going, "Your father did this. Why are you punishing me?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we
Sorry, did
get
you
to
note? Sorry, did you note what Sylvia was wearing?
I mean, her house stuff and her slippers.
Bingo,
Like,
that was
she
what I wanted you to
clearly
say.
just yeah, she just clearly followed Fran straight out as she was, you know? Um, so we then get to the Sheffield residence. Fran's coming through the front door and she's saying, "Stay back, Ma. I know what I have to do." And Sylvia's like saying how she's going to kill that shrink bastard. And she's telling her, "Look what he did to my little girl." And she goes on to say that she's not going to leave that spot. And Niles is like, "Well, why don't we stay in the kitchen?" And of course, like Sylvia gets a look on her face and then goes with Niles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Fran and Maxwell, and Fran starts the conversation by going, "Look, Mr. Sheffield, uh, if I had wait, okay, hang around. My father's never going to change."
Yeah, so
Okay,
she says, look, Mr. Sheffield, I keep hoping that if I hang
yes,
around here long enough, deep down inside, you're going to change. But I've come to
yeah,
realize that my father is never going to change, and I have to accept that in you too.
yeah. And Maxwell's like, "Well, what does this mean?" And Fran's like, "That this arrangement is not going to work out anymore." Maxwell's like, "Well, are you saying you're quitting?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah. We've been together for so many years. You still don't know what you want. I just think that it is a healthier decision for me to make." And Maxwell's like, "Look, Miss Fine, I understand how you're feeling. I really do, but I don't understand." And Frank cuts him off. "Mr. Sheffield, nug already. It's too late. I've made up my mind. I have to leave, I think,
I
and
have to do this.
oh, do this." And so she turns and she's walking towards the front door. And Maxwell's like coming after her, "Please don't go, Miss Fine. Miss Fine, come back. Fran, wait." And Fran immediately gets this facial expression like that we as an audience see, like her eyebrows go up, her eyes get big. And we hear Maxwell go on, "You're right. I suppose I have kept you at an arm's length. Maybe it's because I have a genuine fear of intimacy. I don't know. I just do know that I don't want you to go." And Fran turned around. "Fran?" And he goes, "Fran." And Fran's like, "Does this mean you're going to start calling me Fran now all the time?" And Max was like, "Well, not in front of the children." Fran's like, "Well, how about Niles and Cece?" Max was like, "That wouldn't be very professional." Fran's like, "What about Ma?" And he goes, "Miss Fine." And she turns and goes, "Ciao." And he calls out Fran. And she says, "That's better." And they hug and then kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
There is not.
Okay, can you take us to the final scene?
So I believe we're still in the Sheffield family home. I want to say we're in the kitchen, but now I'm thinking we were actually in the dining room,
No,
like
I think we're actually in the like in the like
foyer.
foyer.
Yeah. Okay. So like Brighton's getting ready to leave and he says goodnight to Fran. Fran's like, Fran has a bowl of popcorn. And she's like, wait, I got to tell you, Maggie's taking you to a bring a geek party. And Brighton's like, Fran, I know that. What am I, stupid? I'm going to meet girls. That's why I'm wearing my cool clothes. And he's wearing like black and white. He looks cool. And Fran's like, uh-huh. Okay, good, good. Well, have fun, honey. He says, thanks. And she's like, oh, and B, sweetie, it probably wouldn't hurt to just work in the words trust fund right into the conversation. And he seems to appreciate that advice.
Mhm. And that's the episode.
Yeah.
So
Is
is
there,
there I was gonna ask you, is there anything you kinda wanna talk about before we get into shticks?
I don't think so. How about you?
Um, I'm just the one thing is timeline-wise is the party, because
Oh, that's fair.
Maggie in the first scene, Maggie's talking about the party starting at 8:30, and
Yeah.
yet, like, time fly like, there it seems like different days throughout, so unless they were just talking ahead in the future,
I guess they
there's
are.
just
You're right. No, that's a really good point.
yeah. 'Cause I was just like, if we're talking about the party being at 8:30 and then at the end of this episode is when Brighton's actually going, it's like, what happened there?" But anyway, and again, the other observation I already pointed out is just how the rooms and the layout of the house just change magically over the seasons.
Episode to episode.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So then shall we jump into favorite fashion?
Left. Did you have a favorite piece of fashion?
I know what I didn't like.
All right. Well, we can start there.
The outfit she wears to see Dr. Miller and
Do you
coming
want to
back.
describe it, or would you like me to?
It's vertical, like zigzag
Uh-huh.
stripe kinda
And it's
thing,
like,
very colorful.
yeah. And there's a matching hat and
Yes.
knee-high white boots. It's
Mhm.
pink and purple and like burgundy and yellow and light blue, dark blue, orange.
Mhm.
It's very colorful.
It is very colorful, very not my personal style as we've established.
Hmm.
Um, do you have a favorite or not so favorite outfit?
Well, I'm definitely not going to say the outfit she wore to Dr. Miller's office now.
No, you can we can
No,
have opposite
no,
tastes.
it's
I
not
know
my
you.
favorite. It's definitely not my favorite. It's just I think one of the most notable pieces she wears in this episode. The other
Yeah.
notable piece, one of the other notable pieces is her orange Muppet coat,
Oh,
which she's
yeah.
definitely worn before. And Cece asked her at that point how many Muppets had to die for that coat. Um,
Mhm.
I kind of liked what she wore to the basketball game.
Yeah.
The
And now my question to you, is this the first time we've actually seen her wear jeans?
No,
Okay.
no, wait.
Because it's rare though.
It's definitely not. No, she wore jeans. I know in the first season. I think it was the first season. It's that episode where she walks into the living room and Gracie has all her dolls in a circle, and Fran's like, "Oh, we're having a tea party," and Gracie's like, "No, this is group therapy."
Oh, okay.
She wore jeans in that. We've seen it. We've definitely seen her wear high waisted jeans before. So
Yeah, but I mean,
it's
again,
so rare.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree entirely. But I kind of like that. The one other thing I want to talk about with her fashion is like it seems like it is winter, considering like when the kids come in the first scene, Francis closed the door, it's cold. Um,
Mhm.
and like obviously the Muppet coat. But then later in the episode, Fran's wearing a very fall pattern. Like
Mhm.
that's actually what she wears when she visits her mom and when she says she's leaving and then doesn't. It's like brown. She's wearing like a brown velvety turtleneck, and then over that is like a brown based like I vest, I guess. That's like a lighter brown, and then it has a dark brown, orange, like green, like basically fall colors.
Mhm.
Um, and that just seems a little inconsistent.
Mhm. Yeah. But because we know timeline-wise that the last episode, it was New Year's already, so it has to be, like, January or so in this episode.
Yeah,
But
minor spoiler, which we'll talk about more in future fun. Uh, the timeline gets all screwy season
okay.
wise.
Just
So
like with everything.
correct. It's fun. It's fun to write fiction
Yeah.
or sitcoms.
Yeah. Any other fashion you wanna discuss?
I don't think so. How about you?
No. So some notable New Yorkers.
All right.
Um, did you put sorority or no?
I did not.
Okay. I just wanted to explain in case. others weren't familiar with the sorority fraternity kind of aspect of certain colleges. Like, not every college or university really has the sorority fraternity scene,
Hmm.
as others do. But basically, you like pledge and join. A sorority is for females, fraternities for males. And so Maggie apparently is part of a sorority at NYU, or is it Columbia?
Columbia.
Columbia? Okay.
Columbia.
Yep. Um, but yeah. Did you put sausages?
I did. There is, and I quote, twisty turny dog treat that's produced by Canine Carryouts. And that's according to our friends at caninecarryouts.com.
Did you put anything about the basketball game?
I didn't, but
I
uh
didn't either. I just didn't know because you like identified it as looking like the
oh,
NASA.
I've been to the Nassau Coliseum, which is how I could
Mhm,
identify it. And second, we've seen it before on the Nanny.
mhm.
So even if we
Uh,
did, we've already talked about it. So
JJ Walker,
we've talked about him before.
mhm, with Dynamite.
Yep.
Um, Secrets of Life.
Secrets and Lies, a
Oh,
1996 R-rated movie about a successful black optometrist who established contact with her biological mother after her adopted parents died. That's according to our friends at imdb.com.
okay. Operation Dumbo Drop.
A 1995 film about the attempts of the U.S. Army to deliver a live elephant to a village during the Vietnam War. Also, according to our friends at imdb.com.
Okay. Catwoman.
I think we previously discussed Catwoman because there's a reference to Catwoman in the last episode of season 3.
Okay.
Why
Rorschach.
do I know that? Because my brain is too full of nanny information to be smarter. Um,
Rorschach.
yeah, so, and I'm going to quote directly from our friends at Wikipedia, a projective psychological test in which the subject's perceptions of ink blots are recorded and then analyzed. End quote.
I think we've talked about Welcome Back, Cotter before.
We have
Okay. Did you put Home Depot?
Arnold Hornshaw. I don't think we talked about before. He was an endearingly dim-witted character from Welcome Back, Cotter, played by Ronald Palilio.
Okay.
Palilio?
Uh, well, I guess we've talked. I think we talked about Vera Wang before, or have we
I
not?
I know we've talked about Home Depot. I didn't think we talked about Vera Wang. Um,
Okay.
Vera Wang is an American fashion designer who launched her own bridal boutique in 1990.
Okay. Um, you didn't put anything regarding the acupuncture, did you?
I did not.
Okay. I just check because sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So I didn't know.
Sorry.
Um, I felt no, like generally, like Raisinette. I
It's a
feel like we don't have
chocolate
as
covered.
many references in this episode
Correct.
as others.
Yeah. So raisinets, chocolate covered raisins. It's a candy.
Mhm. Again, I don't even know how many times we've referenced cats in this
A lot.
series, but another reference goes to cats this time around. I think there's been Katie Ling before.
I
Um,
thought we had two, but I didn't see it in my notes. So I just
oh,
noted
okay.
that she's a Canadian singer, songwriter, and actress who has worked with other nanny notable New Yorkers, Elton John and Tony Bennett. That's according to our
Okay.
friends at Wikipedia. There was also Entenmann's, which we've talked about previously, and
Yeah.
Count Chocula, which is
Mhm.
a line of monster cereals with a cartoon vampire as its mascot. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then are you out?
I'm out.
Yeah. There weren't nearly as many as like last week. I think it was the last week, or was
Yeah,
it the week
last
before?
time there were a lot.
Okay. So then are we ready for some Yiddish cop?
Yes, we are. Um, I didn't have that many. The first one is schmear, which I feel like comes up periodically. That's basically a
Mhm.
spread. So you like schmear cream cheese on a bagel.
Mhm.
We also had gnug already, which by the way, your pronunciation was perfect.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
it basically means enough, like basically enough, like shush. And then
Mhm.
the last one I had was the reference to a Jewish pinata, which in this case was a loaf of challah bread that was stuffed with candy. Challah
Yeah.
is a traditional bread. It's an egg bread. There, my favorite fact about challah is that there is an old wives' tale that says that you can judge the state or quality of a relationship based on the quality of the challah produced. So,
Oh,
like,
interesting.
traditionally, the wife would make the challah, and so she would be able to judge how well her marriage was doing based on the quality of the challah she produced. It is very egg and time intensive, so,
Mhm.
but it is very, very yummy.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. So then, 90s nostalgia?
Old cars.
Yes. And then Fran going to the video store and not being
Mm-hmm.
able to find the video. I definitely remember when I was younger and for, like, sleepovers and stuff, we'd, like, go to Blockbuster and try to pick out some VHS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely VHS. Did
I'm
you
dating myself, but yeah.
did you think that they actually were out of Secrets and Lies, or that Fran just didn't even look and went for her Operation Dumbo Drop?
I mean, that's certainly possible. She just went for it. Um, Although there were occasionally deals, like if you got multiple, you got a percentage off or whatever. I don't know. I don't see why she couldn't have gotten both if they were both there. But anyway, um, do you have one?
Obviously, in Dr. Miller's office, we see the old laptop. Sorry, the old desktop, not even a laptop. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, the also the basketball game seemed very dated,
uh-huh.
as was the entire like interaction of Fran being groped by the guy behind her and that just be kind of a passing whatever, like just accepted as like that's what happens. Does
Oh,
that make sense?
that's a really good point. I was gonna say, I thought you were saying that her being groped was very 90s, and I was gonna say, well, that unfortunately still happens today. But you're right, that just like getting over it, and her mother's reaction felt
Uh-huh.
very
Yeah.
dated. Did you feel a
Yeah.
rank?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like,
I was like,
also like, does that seem like the type of man you'd want to marry your daughter off to? Perhaps not.
no, nope. But then also like just the short clip of the game was, like, very dated looking as well. Um, I don't know. I'm sure uniforms kind of probably look a bit dated to today's eyes and just the greeniness
Mm-hmm.
with it because I think they took just a little short snippet of an actual game as, like, kind of an insert.
Right. I'll point out that the sign that Fran was holding up that said "Happy Birthday, Daddy," the color scheme of that looked very dated to me as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Um,
The concept of a bring a geek party.
yes, yes, good one because that felt so 90s. So, like, that kind of, era of movies,
Right.
like 90s, 80s kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and definitely, like, Brighton's attempt to be cool was very
Mm-hmm.
90s looking in his attempt. Um, but yeah, any other thing you wanted to talk about with that?
No, I think I'm out.
Okay. So this week we actually get to add to the kiss count.
Woohoo!
So we're at 34. We got one more today. So we're at 35.
For the entire series.
Yep. But progress, right?
We're on episode 114.
Yes. And some of those kisses, there were multiple kisses in a single episode. So it's not even like, the average is not even per episode. It's very scattered throughout. But anyway,
Correct.
uh, it's interesting because we can't add to our special category of Fran reminding Maxwell about the thing. But Niles brought up the fact that Maxwell had previously told Fran he loved her, and then he took it back. Um,
Correct.
He was definitely the voice of the audience in that scene.
Uh-huh. Not just the voice of the audience, but the hands of the audience as well.
Yes. So I guess it's time for some future fun.
So kind of what I was hinting at before, which with the time frame, like I'm pretty certain next week they're going to be talking about winter break. Um, or at least that's how I interpreted the like references to like term break. Like
Mhm.
Gracie is going to get invited to visit her classmate in his home country over term break. And to me, that means winter break, which means that it doesn't make sense that it was New Year's like 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before that. Um,
Mhm.
but anyway, next week in the very first scene, we're going to see Fran and Max call each other Fran and Max to their faces,
Mhm.
which is going to be really fun. But then things kind of go off the rails a little bit because Maxwell refuses to basically insist that Fran should go with Grace to the foreign country to visit Grace's friend instead of sending Niles because Maxwell says he needs Niles there for work purposes. Um, and so despite Fran asking Maxwell to like send Niles so they can call each other Fran and Max in every room of the house, um, Fran goes to the Middle East without him, and then he has to go and rescue her. Um, and while he is there, they take a very big step forward. He tells her that he loves her and then doesn't take it back.
Wow. That's the big step, is not taking it back.
Exactly. He says he loves her and doesn't take it back. And then after that, the following week, they take an even bigger step, which
Mm.
he then does take back briefly. So
Maxwell.
yeah, it's like one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two
Mhm.
steps back. And then finally, I just want to reiterate that we will actually meet Morty where we see him talk and like see his face, we hear him talk in season 6. And we'll see him in, I believe, 2 episodes.
Mhm.
So anyway, maybe I should have started with Morty and then work my way up to like Maxwell's gonna say he loves her and doesn't take it back. Sorry, my timing was not great on that front.
It's
My
okay.
apologies.
You couldn't help it. It's so
I couldn't.
exciting, right?
It is so exciting. And then um, the following week, they take an even bigger step. And then the week after that, people start acknowledging that they've taken this big step. And yeah,
Okay. So as episode rating time.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just as a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. Always, we have the caveat that this is arbitrary. It's for fun, and we reserve the right to, change our ratings at a later date. Obviously, if you want to let us know what your thoughts on the show are, feel free to let us know by, through our social media or email. This week, I have to go first.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
And this is a conundrum for me, just because there were some great aspects of this show, of like this episode. Niles was amazing,
Yes, he was.
with Maxwell. It was sweet when he called her Fran. It became a little less sweet when he was like, "No, I'm not gonna call you that in front of anybody," like, and she accepted it because it was like, "Yeah, go girl, like, you need, like, to,
You're
set
standing
your
up for yourself.
boundaries and, like, all of that," and so she does that for a bit, and then it still seems a little manipulative.
I
It's a step forward.
yes.
This is where I'm having a bit of a difficulty with that particular, like, if he hadn't added, like, all
If
of
he hadn't
the
refused to call her Fran in front of other people.
yeah, it would have been more sweet, I think. But again, classic tiny step forward. The other aspect is we kind of talked about it. Not a big fan again of like that attitude of her getting groped at the basketball game. But then
Fair.
also the whole thing about bring a geek dance or party or whatever was not fun. It helped a little bit at the end that Brighton at least seemed to be aware of it. So it wasn't like he was totally in the dark. Um,
Mhm.
but still, that whole concept, mm, I didn't really find funny. So that's where I have difficulty with rating it because there's some really, again, that scene with Niles was chef's kiss. Like, thank you,
Mhm.
Niles, for being the audience in that moment.
Yes.
Uh, but but yeah. Um I think I'm just gonna be
Okay, let me ask you, did you like this more or less than last week?
I don't know. So I think I'm definitely more. I was just
Okay.
contemplating how weird I was getting with my percentages. I'll just go with a 4.75 at this point and
Okay.
reserve the right to buy that at a later time. How
Okay.
about you?
I'm giving it a 5. Solid 5.
Yeah, I thought so.
This, you are right. I don't care for how Sylvia handles Fran getting groped. I don't care as much about the bring a geek party. Um, I love.
Well, because the other aspect of that, I'm sorry for interrupting,
Yeah, go
is
ahead.
he's underage still.
True.
Like, I've been consistent where I don't like that.
Fair.
But anyway, go ahead.
Um, yeah, I don't care in this episode.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I I love Niles for basically telling, as you put it, being the audience and like manhandling Maxwell to be like trying to bash some sense into him because he clearly needs it. I like Gracie being sort of, Fran's therapist briefly and getting her to actually use her time in therapy to not just complain about Maxwell. So that's good. I like that Sylvia provides, sage advice and then immediately wants to cut out her tongue. I love the scene between Fran and Maxwell where she's telling him that she's had enough. And he realizes that she has had enough. And yes, you're right. In reality, it would be manipulative of him to do that. But this is a romantic comedy, like a romantic sitcom. So we give it a bit of a pass. And it makes me happy that they're taking a step forward. And again, we're going to I will say he does eventually call her Fran in front of everyone, if that makes you feel any better. So another piece
Well,
of future
you
future
better
fun.
at some point.
Um, it's just, yeah, I this is one of my favorite episodes, not just in the season, but in the series. And so it gets a 5 in my book.
Okay, fair enough. Is there any other kind of broader thing you want to talk about before we sign off for the week?
I don't think so. How about you?
Nope.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 115, Not Without My Nanny.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.